All right. Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. This is the Michigan edition, the 21 best games from the Jim Harbaugh era in Michigan football. Episode one, we're going to do about seven games this episode, but only two are going to be honorable mentions. We're going to count 21 down to 17. This will be your starter. We're going to get several episodes in before we drop to the number one game. I am Jeff. You're Dan. Dan, what's going on, dude?
Well, we're just banging them out. Someone called this a 2 for Tuesday, so we're here for a series that's been long awaited and ready to get down to it, man.
Yeah, let's talk about the origin of this idea. So I've had you on now for we were on for the 2020 season.
Yeah.
So the first year of this pod around Michigan football time, we joined up and we started the Michigan edition of Real Talk. And 2020 was not the season we wanted. 2021 was a one to remember. 2022 was even better, arguably. And then here we are coming into this coming season. And at some point during the season, I kind of threw out this idea. I was like, hey, what about during the offseason if we did the best games from the Jim Harbaugh era? And you're like, dude, that's more up my alley than even just regular podcasting. Like, this is kind of what I've always wanted to do. You're kind of a Michigan historian in a way. Talk about your background in this, your like for the history of Michigan football. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the block. I've said before, the block M is my religion. And obviously, when you grow up being a young kid, when you gravitate to a team and you have all your favorite players and stuff like that, and you start building memories. And the best way I can compare myself, if anyone see the movie Fever Pitch with Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore, he's a diehard Boston Red Sox fan, season ticket holder. That's essentially me. I don't have Michigan, themed, shower curtains. My wife would kill me, but it's just it's my life's blood. And so I always wanted to start my own Michigan podcast, just never did it, never had the time. And part of me was going to do a lot of reminiscing and a lot of, recalling back, to what started out being the reason why I became a fan and stuff like that. And I think that just overall, me as a person, I like to think about the bad times as well as the good times. And obviously, this series is just going to be, what gets me up in the morning.
So I'll briefly talk about what I was looking for when I was ranking these games. I'd like you to do the same. I was looking at, first off, how big was the game?
Yeah.
Was it a ranked matchup? Was game day there? Was it a big-time road win? Was it monumental at the time? Maybe it was a week one game that, they were an underdog in, or you didn't think much of it. What was the feeling around that game going into the game? Then what was the feeling going out of the game? Did they, was it a game where they were projected to score 14 and scored 40? Things like that. Like, what was essentially the outcome? And then another thing I looked at was, how will this game be remembered in the grand scheme of things? Was there a certain thing that happened in that game that maybe caused an outcome for a future game? There was a lot of things that I took into consideration. And when I was ranking these games, I kind of put them where I felt was essentially most important. Didn't have a chance to attend. Honestly, I don't even know if I counted how many games of these I've actually been to. It'd be very little. A lot of the games that I've been to are typically your first three games against these younger dogs where they're getting beat up on. And the only Michigan-Ohio State game I ever went to was not in the Jim Harbaugh era, so would not make this list and loss. But overall, I feel really good about my list. And then I got your list. And as I was starting to rank them and look at where you had yours and where I had mine, I'm like, wow, we see things completely different. And I was curious why. And I think it's a great thing to start off. What was your kind of criteria as you were ranking these games?
So mine was importance and like what were the stakes? What were we playing for a chance to go to Indianapolis? Were we playing a chance to be a bowl? Were we playing for a chance to, beat a rival? Were we playing for a chance to go to a BCS bowl? And all of it too, or excuse me, another one was me being there personally, and of course, one of the biggest things is who we were playing against. Was it Ohio State? Was it Michigan State? How bad was or how bad was it for our foe to take an L to us? So stuff like that. But yeah, so that, I mean, it's pretty much how I did. Was pretty much the stakes, and if I was there personally, but yeah.
So the only way that a game is going to be on this list is if both of us had mentioned the game. There was 19 games in which we agreed on. There were 2 games in which make the list because it was your highest ranked game and my highest ranked game that neither one of us had rated. And then the other 2, 4, 6, 7 games that we're going to have as honorable mentions, they're not going to take place in the ranking. We're going to talk about them briefly, but they're not going to have a spot in the rankings, and they're going to go basically from 2022 down to 2015. So those games technically, they don't have any kind of order. We're just briefly going to talk about them. So let's go ahead and start her off here with the first honorable mention. This one happened just this past season. We have the 2022 season. Michigan travels to Iowa. Let's give the recap. So the records, you have Michigan, who's 4-0, heading to Iowa, who's 3-1. I think the biggest storyline heading into this game was that Iowa was the giant killer. 5 of their last 6 opponents had fallen to Iowa on the road at Iowa. So it's like Michigan fell into that category. They were a top 5 team. What's going to happen? Where are we sitting? Iowa had been able to play up. Now, mind you, Iowa just 2 weeks earlier than this had scored, I believe it was 7 points, and none of them were on
offense.
Correct. It was a field goal and 2 safeties, and they had won 7-6. So it's like people are like, is Michigan potentially in trouble? It's like if Michigan scores 10 points, they might be good.
Right.
Michigan had also lost the last 4 games at Iowa, so it wasn't looking pretty. Michigan hadn't won at Iowa since 2005. Any other notes you want to talk about going into this game?
Yeah, going into this game was obviously Kinnick was kind of the voodoo and kind of the monkey on Michigan's back. And it was, so I don't know if you mentioned it, but 2005 was the last time they won there.
Yeah.
So it was definitely something like how last year's, was it last year? No, it was 2 years ago where they went to Camp Randall and won with Cade McNamara. So that was
2021. Yeah.
That was another big road game. So yeah, that was pretty much all I have to know. I mean, really, Iowa's offense was absolutely abysmal. And the thing is it's Kinnick Stadium, and Iowa always has a good defense. So the game has the potential to be, upset alert time. And I know a lot of people were picking Iowa to win this game.
Yeah, the last note that I had was this was actually a rematch of the 2021 Big Ten championship game, a game in which Michigan won 42-3. So it didn't feel like Michigan was in a lot of trouble. I think both of us, even on that recent pod, we were both pretty confident that Michigan was going to win this game, but by how much? Was it going to be just 3 or was it going to be 30? I mean, 30 didn't feel possible. But I think we were both pretty confident. Is there any memories you have from this game?
Well, I know the opening drive was beautifully scripted, and Michigan went right down and scored seamlessly.
Yes.
And so that the way, judging by just that vibe alone, we're like, wow, Michigan's going to absolutely roll them on offense. And they only scored once. They scored a touchdown only in the first, third, and fourth quarter. They kicked 2 field goals in the second. But the other one I have is, I believe, Donovan Edwards caught a goal line touchdown pass that was kind of, let's say, a jump ball, but kind of like falling back in the end zone, which I think JJ was on the move on a bootleg-ish type deal, and so I kind of remember that. And Blake Corum had another strong showing and made one of the nastiest jukes I've seen him do, and he deked a guy, I think Jack Campbell, who's going to be in the NFL draft this year, to get in the end zone.
Let me read that. It says Blake Juke.
So those were probably the three things I remember the most about this. And I mean, I don't want to remember that the Hawkeyes had 2 garbage time touchdowns at the end, and Michigan for some reason decided to play way off the receivers, and Spencer Petras had probably the game of his life with 246 passing yards. So Michigan was pretty content of just letting them nickel and dime them, and when they knew that they had enough buffer zone that they just didn't care.
Yeah, so I have 3 things written down as memories. One of them I still see till this day. Matter of fact, there was a meme going around on April 5th, 2023. There's a bunch of sad Buckeye fans, and in the very middle, it's the J.J. McCarthy wave from when he was at Kinnick, waving to the kids at the Children's Hospital. But so the J.J. McCarthy wave stands out. The Blake juke. Holy cow, that juke was so filthy.
Yeah.
And then I just remember this game felt big. I know Iowa wasn't a great team, but it felt like a really big win. Michigan wins 27-14. It felt worth talking about as an honorable mention, but just goes to show you how many better games are on here, because this one did not make the list.
Yep.
Anything else before you move on?
Nope.
The next honorable mention, sticking with 2022 here. This is an interesting one. It's Michigan State from 2022. So Michigan comes into the game 7-0. Michigan State not having a great year. They're 3-4. The notes I have is obviously 2021 was not Michigan's year. They go to East Lansing and they blow a big lead and they lose to State. And Jim Harbaugh has a losing record to the Michigan State-Ohio State combined rivalry. So this never felt guaranteed, even though Michigan State was a 3-4 team. I think the spread was even under double digits. I don't think that, Vegas even believed that Michigan was going to pound on Michigan State. I already know, but what's your memory from this game?
Well, let me say this. I didn't have this ranked in my top 21, and I was at this game. Partially because you got to leave some out. You can't fit all of them one. You can only be 21, right?
Correct.
Being there, I mean, there were some big plays that happened, but to me, it was probably one of the more boring Michigan State games. I know, the Michigan ran like 52 times for 276 yards, so they were just it almost seemed like they just were going to run the ball and get out of there. But, I do remember Keon Coleman from Michigan State went up and got a nasty one on Jermaine Green. And the thing with Michigan corners last year was they had great coverage. He just didn't turn his head around, and Keon Coleman burned him, and he ended up getting a $155 and 7 catches and a touchdown, which was that. But so there was that one, the Blake Corum forward handoff, which I think was a receiving touchdown. That was on our end zone, so I saw that in front of me. What else there was? That was really all I can remember. And I wasn't drinking heavily, but I do remember losing my voice yelling at Mel Tucker, not like you could hear me. So that was, for memories, pretty much what I can recall there without looking at what I wrote down.
So one thing we forgot to do last game for the last one, you had the 2022 at Iowa as your 20th ranked game. I did not have it ranked. That's why it's an honorable mention. I had this one. It's crazy. I had this game ranked 8th.
Oh, wow.
I think just ultimately looking back, I think this one it's gonna mean more in 10 years than it does right now.
Right.
Anytime we beat Michigan State, it has to feel big, and I understand why you left it off, because there are a lot of great games. But I had it ranked really high, and unfortunately, it's going to make an honorable mention. It's not going to make the list, but you ready for the first one that does make the list?
Absolutely.
Well, I guess we'll back up quick. I had my memories: the tunnel fight,
unfortunately,
staying undefeated. obviously felt big at the time. Moving to 8-0, and it just felt like we were in the driver's seat to win the Big Ten that year. And I think after this game, I was talking my talk. Like I thought Michigan was going to beat Ohio State. Like I just felt like it was all about Michigan at this point. They just felt different. Yeah. Or actually, my motto for the 2022 is this team's the same. But Michigan wins 29-7. And now our first game. The 21st ranked game that Dan and I have on our list is Michigan at Minnesota from 2015. So this is Harbaugh's first year. This is as early as you can pretty much go, is 2015. Michigan comes into the game 5-2. Minnesota comes into the game 4-3. The notes that I have is Minnesota actually had the brown jug coming into this game. So they were looking for back-to-back brown jug wins. It would have been their first time since like the 60s winning the brown jug back-to-back. Michigan, this was Harbaugh's first year there, so things were hyped up, but unfortunately they got off to a rocky start. They lose week 1 to Iowa, and then of course they lose a couple weeks later, trouble with the snap to Michigan State. So they come into this game with 2 losses.
It was Utah they lost to.
Who did I say?
Iowa.
Oh, I had Utah written down. No joke. Sorry. My bad. So they lose week 1 at Iowa. Wow, holy cow! At Utah.
Yeah.
Utah. You know, the place where you can have like 7 wives. And then obviously the trouble with the snap game against Michigan State. This is Harbaugh's first year. Those are my notes. What other notes do you have for this game?
Yeah, for this game, really the 2015, it was really apparent that the offensive line was going to need a lot of work. 2014, the offensive line, you might as well just had a bunch of blind people in front because Devin Gardner was just getting absolutely obliterated week in, week out, especially the Michigan State game. So Michigan going into this game, try to run the ball. They were averaging less than 4 yards a game, and they didn't do a whole lot through the air either. This was just kind of, a touch and feel back and forth up, play to the 40-yard line on your own side of the field, punt the ball. But Jake Rudock, got knocked out of this game late, and Wilt Spate goes in there and give me 1 second. So Wilt Spate goes into this game, dials up Armara Darboh for a 2-point conversion.
Yep.
And then Michigan goes on to survive at the goal line. And how this game ends is, if you're a Michigan fan, you remember, is, Mitch Leidner has got Minnesota driving. All they need is a field goal, a field goal to win, a field goal
to tie.
The tie, but they go for the win. And with 20 seconds left, Mitch Leidner is at the line of scrimmage, and he is like backing up, like Tom Brady, calling an audible here, calling an audible there, and they have no timeouts. And it's like, what are you guys doing here? You got to hike the ball, got to spike the ball, got to do something. They might have one timeout. They didn't have timeout because obviously
they didn't.
So they let it drain down. They run a play. They don't complete anything. So now they have like 1 second left, a couple seconds left, and then when they hike the ball again, donezo, nothing. And so Michigan survived one. But the reason why I actually had this one as my 10th was it was on the road. Obviously, call it a rivalry game. Don't have to call it a rivalry game, but this was, I think, the first year that Minnesota moved to their new arena. Could be wrong. Their new stadium, rather. And crowd was amped. Late night game ish. And, Jake Rudock gets knocked out. And again, Wilt Spate's got to come in there and doesn't bat an eye, throws that 2-point conversion and that late touchdown. That was absolutely huge, absolutely monumental. So, they survived this one. 2015 was definitely up and down. And this was one of the ups, I guess you could say.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I did not have this game ranked. And when you sent me your list, the one game that felt like a kick in the nuts, like how did I forget it, was this game.
Yeah.
Even, you were really high on the 2022 Iowa game. Like you had him 20th and I didn't have that one. When I seen that you had 2015 at Minnesota, I literally thought to myself, I'm like, wait, what? And then when I looked, I'm like, the goal line stand.
Yeah.
Like that was really you could argue that's Harbaugh's best win to that moment. Going on the road and winning a rivalry trophy, the Little Brown Jug, and bringing that back to Ann Arbor, especially after losing at Utah and home against Michigan State, in which at this point, I think there's a lot of people like, oh, gosh, Jim is screwing this up. And
Right.
My two memories, obviously the goal line stand and J.U. Chesson hauling in 2 touchdowns, had a great game in this game. Yeah, I think ultimately this game will be remembered by Michigan fans as that horrible time management late in the game for the goal line stand. I think that's the lasting memory of this game. You had it 10th, as you said, and I did not have it ranked, but there we go. Michigan wins this game 29-26. Anything else?
No, I think that does it. I kind of knocked mine out all there, but yeah, just terrible clock management, and we survived. And it was, I mean, this was back to back to another game that made my list. At least I know for sure of this late game antics, on the edge of your seat type deal. And so we'll get to that. I don't want to say that other game if can't remember, but we'll get to that when we cross that bridge.
Game number 20. Number 4 Michigan versus number 8 Wisconsin in 2016 in Ann Arbor. 4-0 versus 4-0. Here's the note here. Harbaugh beats a top 10 team for the first time. Wisconsin had already through 4 games beaten number 8 Michigan State and number 5 LSU. They were humming. Mm-hmm. They were beating great teams, and they have Michigan on their schedule in 2016, Harbaugh's second year, okay? And low scoring, okay? Low scoring. This game ends up 14-7. I mean, there's not a whole lot going on. There's a lot of turnovers by Wisconsin. Michigan struggled to run the ball. I think they got 3 yards a carry off like 40 attempts or something. They didn't have a lot of success in this game. What are your notes before we go into memories here?
Yeah, my notes were, let's see. Well, real quick too, this was one of the games where you ranked, and I didn't even have this on my list.
Correct. So this was my highest ranked game that you did not have on yours. I had this as number 7, and you didn't have it ranked. And I'm still curious as to why you don't. If you wouldn't mind elaborating.
I don't know. I think it was just came down to just didn't have room to fit it, and I know Wisconsin was on a kind of a small streak there, and they end up I think winning 11 games this year. I think they go 11-3 if I'm not mistaken. But I just don't know. I guess all I can say is I just thought other ones were more important to me. I guess, but yeah, the biggest memory from this game is the Amara Darboh long touchdown. That's what sticks out to me the most. Well, I'll say the most, but one of them. And then the second one is the Jordan Lewis one-hander.
Yes, the Jordan Lewis pick is the memory.
Yeah, so those 2 plays, when I see this 14-7 stat line, that's what I remember.
Yeah, and I guess from my standpoint, it was hard to leave off a number 4 versus number 8 matchup.
Yeah.
In which they win. I understand why, you left off a 14-7 game. I get that. But I do feel like this was one of the better teams that Michigan had was 2016. And this was a very good Wisconsin team. Like I said, they had already beat number 8 Michigan State and number 5 LSU. I thought they were really humming through this game. And Michigan takes care of business and wins 14-7. It's like, what more else do you want? This felt like a team of destiny. Later, they would go into Columbus and lose, and unfortunately, the 2016 team just isn't looked at. But I thought this was probably one of their 2 best wins of that season.
Yeah. Yep.
Obviously, I had the Jordan Lewis interception as my memory. You gave yours. Anything else from Michigan's 14-7 win over Wisconsin?
Well, I mean, Alex Hornibrook, which was Wisconsin's starting quarterback at the time, he goes 9 for 25 and throws 3,
88 yards.
Yeah, Channing Stribling gets 2 of those interceptions. Jordan Lewis obviously had the one-hander, and it was completely nasty. But, shining Wisconsin Badger, TJ Watts on this team, he gets 11 tackles, got a sack, got 2 TFLs, tackles for loss. And, Amara Darboh and Khalid Hill, Michigan's fullback at the time, is the only 2 that make an impact on the scoreboard. And I thought it was interesting to just look right now because I have all of our games that we're talking about tonight. I have the ESPN Gamecast, everything up right now, and I looked at that sheet on rushing, and Shane Morris runs one time for 2 yards. And if anyone remembers, Shane Morris was the last 5-star Michigan quarterback that was going to be our godsend, and everyone was falling on the sword for him because, he was lighting it up. He was a lefty, and he was having all these players trying to recruit all these players from the Michigan and committed to Brady Hoke, whatever. And then obviously Brady Hoke almost killed him on the field. So I thought it was kind of funny to see him go 1 for 2 yards. So I'm assuming he tried to do a QB sneak or something stupid. But yeah, that's me for Wisconsin there.
This next game, number 19, it weirdly enough only makes the list because I ranked 24 games. You ranked 23. It was my 24th game.
And it was my 17th.
Yeah. And again, people view Michigan games differently. I was curious as to why you ranked this game ahead of the last one. Michigan beating number 8 Wisconsin versus Michigan winning week 1 against Minnesota. But here we are. Let's say the game. Number 19. It's the 2020 season, week 1. The number 18 Michigan Wolverines traveled to Minnesota to beat the number 21 Minnesota Golden Gophers. Minnesota had a very great season the year prior. This was a week 1 battle. People forget because of COVID, this week 1 matchup did not take place till October 24th. So it was late in the year. There were no fans, and it was the ABC primetime night game. We're watching this game in your basement, okay? Socially distanced, of course. But what other notes do you have before we get into this one?
Well, I mean, it was the reason why it's at 17 for me. There was a lot of, I guess, maybe I still feel that way. Obviously, because of COVID, Michigan's, season obviously didn't start till Halloween weekend. Essentially, I was just fiending for football. Joe Milton is the starting quarterback at the time. Urban Meyer is pumping this dude up. They're saying he's, going to be Cam Newton come again. And what happens in this game is an absolute beatdown. And so I'm just kind of riding high off this, and was just I guess really back to the COVID thing with not having football right away. It was something that I was just ready to get my teeth on, to chew on it, and I soaked it up, man. And so yeah, that's my excuse for ranking it as high as I did.
My memories for this game, the Joe Milton hype from Urban Meyer, I have written down. Urban Meyer calling in Cam Newton before the game, and I know my hype on Joe Milton. This was like 2 years in the making for me. I couldn't wait for Joe Milton to get the starting job, and he got it. And after this 1 week, I was basically saying Michigan was winning the national championship. He's winning the Heisman. I thought we were going to go undefeated. The run game, weirdly enough, for those of you that don't remember this game very well, this run game was very 2021, 2022. 31 carries for 256 and 5 touchdowns. I believe Hassan Haskins had a couple of touchdowns in this game. So literally this team coming out of this, Urban Meyer, I remember distinctly listening to this. Urban Meyer, prior to week 2, was asked about how he felt Michigan looked. And he said it was the best coach game Michigan has ever had. That's what he said. That was the best coach game Michigan ever had. And I'll remember that to this day because he was basically talking about how like Michigan was a contender again. And obviously we know that this COVID season was horrendous and I don't have this written down, and I don't have this fact checked, but I'm almost positive Aiden Hutchinson gets hurt in this game too, if I'm not mistaken.
You know, I honestly, I think he does. I don't remember 100%, but if it's ringing your bell, there's a good chance it did happen. But I don't, I didn't write that down. I don't remember,
Yeah.
but yeah, go ahead.
Michigan beat them down though, like you said. After having a scare of no football, this game, I remember that night so vividly. We were at your house, we're in your basement, and there's a group of us. And matter of fact, it was that was the last time that me, you, and Brad, real talk, were ever together. I think that's the one and only time, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we played beer pong, didn't we?
Yeah. We played base pong, and Brad stole home. Shout out, Brad, if you're listening. Yeah, I think ultimately it's just like that game. I remember leaving your house that night thinking to myself, Michigan is so back. And it took a minute. Obviously, we know 2021 turns around, but I get why you have that so high, but at the same time, or I get why you had it ranked, but
yeah,
for me, it almost missed the list. It barely made it.
Right. So, and real quick too, the what I remember most from this game, is, Michael Barrett sacking Mitchell. Mitchell isn't that Mitchell? Yes, Tanner Morgan rather. Sorry,
Tanner Morgan.
And as he hits him, the ball squirts up in the air, and then Donovan Jeter catches it, and then, six to the house. So that's the one play that I remember the most. But yeah, between these 31 carries, Haskins gets 6, Charbonnet gets 4, Joe Milton scrambles for 8 times, Blake Corum gets 5, Chris Evans gets 5, Giles Jackson gets 1, AJ Henning gets 1. Pretty wild stat lines across the board, to be honest. And some name drops like Rashad Bateman went 9 for 101, didn't score, but he had a day. And then Mohamed Ibrahim, he went 26 for 140 and 2 touchdowns. So, while it was a 49-24 win for Michigan, Minnesota, was, making some noise on the ground at times. And so it was a game where, obviously, like I said, it was a layup for me in terms of getting hyped for it, because obviously of the time period we're living in.
Michigan wins this game 49-24. Unfortunately, the season kind of unravels after this. They lose almost every game after this, and they beat it.
Well, real quick too, for the people, like when we were doing these rankings lists, I first, I think when we were teasing each other of what we put in there, I was like, we're going through like per year how many games we have in there, and Jeff goes, for 2020 I got nothing, and I'm like, I got one, and you're like, you got one? I was like, yeah. He's like,
well, if you're actually leaving a part out, and it's going to actually preview this next game, we had both listed.
Yeah.
We had ranked them, but we had gone year by year and wrote all the games that were eligible essentially to make this list. And you're like, I don't have any from 2017. And I'm like, you don't? You're like, I only have one from 2020. I'm like, you have a game from 2020? Like, we only won 2. What game could you possibly have? And weirdly enough, that this game made the list, and I ended up ranking it 24th, the last game possible. And the only reason it made this list is for a lot of reasons you talked about. It was the first game past COVID. Football's back. It felt really big at the time. Felt really big. Even Urban Meyer was calling it monumental. Unfortunately, it didn't hold up. But this next game is one that I had to talk you into. It's number 18. It's the 2017 Cowboy Classic, Week 1. It's number 11 Michigan against number 17 Florida. Week 1. Jerry World, Cowboy Classic. Amazon Prime announced before the season started they were going to be following the team this year. So you have the Amazon Prime basically following the whole 2017 season. The most important thing about this game, the all-maize uniforms, baby. These all-maize look so clean. Okay. What do you have for your notes before we get into memories here?
So this game, yeah, you did talk me into it, and this did actually end up making 18 on my list as well. But
it was 15 on mine, so we're right about there.
Right. So what would be a forgettable season, just like 2020, 2017 felt the same way in my opinion. but it starts off with, I won't say like a banger, but it started off, this game gave you promise for the year. Wilt Spate, for all that he did was, at times would throw a pick six. I think he did it like 3 different times in 3 different games. This was one of them. So he had to shake that one off, and he did that one early. Tariq Black, the true freshman, really shined. He came in and scored a touchdown, and so he was a true freshman. So this was a year that the recruiting class boasted top wide receivers. Donovan Peoples-Jones was the number 1 wide receiver in his recruiting class. So that was an absolutely huge get. I was doing a lot of research real quick. When I look at the defensive stat lines, Michigan's like magic number for team sacks was always 6 for some reason, or a lot of times it was 6. This game they had 6 sacks. They beat up on Malik Zaire, who just was running for his life. Probably had a nice bath afterwards, and dominating just about every category except for penalties. And so the in terms of memory and like play wise was definitely the Tariq Black one, and maybe the sack in the end zone safety where Chase Winovich, he smoked Zaire down, and it was, I want to say, a little extra sauce on that because Zaire was a former Notre Dame quarterback, so it was maybe a little extra, like little boot in the ass at that point. But man, it was something. I mean, Michigan ran 49 times in this game, which is absolutely absurd. Like, I don't know. It was just it was a wild game for sure.
Yeah, my memories of this game were the defensive touchdowns. Michigan's Chase Winovich, as you alluded to, but Florida's only 2 touchdowns were pick sixes in the first half. So yeah. Michigan actually went into halftime down, and then they exploded in the second half. The Tariq Black wide open touchdown in the first quarter. Harbaugh's 2015. We'll talk about that throughout this entire series. There was a lot of hype, and unfortunately, it under-delivered. It almost could never match the amount of hype it was getting. 2016, that season fell short, losing to Iowa on the road, losing to Ohio State, with the goal line, not the goal line, same, but the 4th down. JT was short game, and then they lose to Florida State in the bowl game. And it felt, the season was just like, gosh, it rode so high and then burned out so fast. This game going into this season felt huge. Return of Wilton Spate, the star wide receivers you're talking about. We were getting a little swagger. The all-maize jerseys were beating down on Florida like we're known to do. It had a lot of promise. I just remember leaving this game thinking to myself, like, wow. And you'll hear me talk about this a lot, and this is kind of where, obviously they had to prove it for Dan. The 2021 season. The Dan that you guys know on this pod is not the Dan that I know, okay? Because 2021 did the job. It proved it for him. 2022 proved it for him. He was always skeptical. It didn't matter what Michigan was doing. The next week, he was like, well, be aware of this. So they'll probably lose here. And he was right most of the time. Where me, it was like, they'd have a game like this. I'm like, we're winning the Natty, baby. We're winning the Natty. And it just always felt like a letdown season, and that's what 2017 was. So when you told me you didn't have a 2017 game, I knew why. But I felt I had to talk you into at least this one because it had a lot of promise.
Right. I think I said it like a long time ago, but if we ever did this podcast during this season or during 2018, my temperament would be a lot different, and you probably would have to put me on mute a couple of times because I'd probably go on like a 5-minute rant. One too many instances, but yeah, it's definitely a lot different now. And we talked about last year how we've forgiven Jim Harbaugh, but yeah, this is like I said in my notes, 2020 and 2017. I don't want to remember them. Outside of this game, I don't remember it.
Yeah, it's bad when an Ohio State fan, my father-in-law, looks at me and goes, "Why can't you guys just roll out John O'Corn again?" So it's bad when he says that. So one more game. Actually, so Michigan wins that one 33-17. Anything else on that?
I'm no, good at the Cowboy Classic. I'm good.
Yeah,
there.
I had it 15. You had it 18. So literally right average. We have it at 18. But number 17. This is The number 17 ranked game, the 2022 season, Michigan versus Illinois. Michigan's 10-0, Illinois 7-3. 1 week prior, this was the potential Big Ten championship game. So this game had a lot at stake. Illinois had not lost a ton of games, and then all of a sudden they started to drop. They had dropped 2 in a row, and they did not want to drop 3 in a row. This game felt like we could win 21-0 before the game even started, but from the moment it started, they punched us in the mouth. So no Donovan Edwards in this game coming into the game. We already knew that. Obviously, the reason this game is on this list is because without this game, you could argue Michigan doesn't win the following week against Ohio State. You could argue that Michigan's not going to win a Big Ten championship, playing a college football playoff. I mean, Michigan had to win this game.
Yeah.
And Blake Corum gets injured in the second quarter, I believe it was. He took 1 carry in the third quarter and couldn't keep going. Jake Moody was a god. 4 for 4 field goals. I kicked an extra point. Without Donovan Edwards, without Blake Corum, this game felt over. What do you have as notes and memories here?
One man, one hero, one Jake Moody.
Yes.
Absolute savior of this game. This one was an honorable mention for me. Again, this one just sort of happened to get left out, and I felt like, I know Illinois was what had some momentum going into this game, and I knew it was monumental, but it didn't make part of the reason why it was in my honorable mentions is because I think that Michigan should have won this game by a lot bigger of a margin. Obviously, losing Blake Corum hurts. You know, when he gets hit on the sideline, and anytime I guess you see a player holding his knee, you're like, fuck, ACL, right? And, you know, fumbles the ball, loses it. I think there was a point in this game where it was like a crucial 4th down with Tavier Dunlap maybe running down the side, like bouncing outside or something like that, or he caught a 4th down conversion to set up the field goal for.
I believe it was Isaiah Gash
or Isaiah Gash. Okay,
yeah.
But yeah, it was. I just felt, Chase Brown. We didn't stop him, so that was getting irritating. But yeah, I mean, Jake Moody came in clutch, and the locker room was popping off afterwards. And I feel like that if they lose this game, you're right. I mean, the following week could be a lot different. And I never liked Brett Bielema. Still don't like Brett Bielema. He's a douche. And to see him piss and moan after the game about losing, I'm all for it. I don't know exactly what he was mad about. I think it might have been about the penalties or something. Maybe I'm misremembering on that one too. But I just don't like Brett Bielema.
Yeah. So there was I believe there was an illegal screen set on the 3rd down play or 4th down play, whatever it was that Gash got. I think he called an illegal screen that was not called, and there was one other disappointing pass interference call that he was basically saying the refs gave Michigan the game late in the 4th quarter, I believe it was. But for me, the memories are Blake Corum losing the Heisman Trophy in this game.
Yeah.
It was an absolute kick in the nuts, and it was the first time in 2 years that after a game we had won, I felt defeated. Not knowing if Donovan Edwards would be back, not knowing if Blake Corum could give it a go the following week. Ohio State is literally in our windshield, not in our rearview mirror, but our windshield. They're right there. They're the next game, and it's like, this is senior day in Ann Arbor, and we're squeaking by against the Illinois was not a slot. So I'm not trying to. They had won. They were 7-1 at one point, so they were a pretty good football team.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it took Jake Moody kicking the game winner. He'll never buy a beer in Ann Arbor the rest of his life. I thought that J.J. McCarthy played exceptional in the second half when he needed to be, because we were usually. I mean, you have the stats in front of you?
Yeah.
Can you name all the running backs that took carries in this game?
Blake Corum, 18 for 108 and a tutty. C.J. Stokes, 11 for 36.
He got hurt. He ended up getting hurt.
Yep, McCarthy 7 for 18, Isaiah Gash 3 for 6, and Tamir Dunlap 1 for 0.
So a bunch of guys that normally would not get carries are taking carries in basically a must-win game to try and stay alive here. Yeah, I mean, I think it will hold up bigger in 10 years when you're looking back on this 2022 team. I have this game ranked 9th. You obviously did not have it that. You had it 23rd. That was your last ranked game. You only ranked 23 games. So it falls in the middle at 17. It probably could go a couple notches down, but I do believe that this game will have more. It'll have more credibility in a couple of years, I feel like. But
yeah, and real quick to point out is the way this we talked about it last year when we did our post game of the Indiana game when Mike Hart unfortunately had a health emergency and collapsed on the sideline, and after that happened, there was an aura, there was this energy around the field that Michigan was just off its game, and we commented on how when he was a player at Michigan, when he would miss a game or go out with an injury, they literally said he was the heart of the team. Like there was something missing when he wasn't there. And so with Blake Corum here, Michigan kind of did the same thing where they just couldn't get anything going on offense. And just think, in one half, the man was at 18 carries and 108 yards and a touchdown. Like they could not stop this man. And so then obviously the Heisman campaign falls short here, and it's just it sucks of what could have been. What could have happened in the TCU game for all we know. Could have happened. Dominic Edwards won't have two long ass runs in Columbus if Blake Corum's healthy. So a lot of what ifs, and in that one of that the energy that dissipated was definitely there.
yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, Michigan does not play their best game. They win 19-17, but they stay undefeated, and they have a second straight undefeated season at home, and they're going into Columbus for a right to play for the Big Ten championship. So that was all you could ask after this game. One of the reasons I had it so high, where Michigan is 11-0 again. So that's it for this round. We gave you 2 honorable mentions. We gave you 21 through 17. Next time, we will give you 16 through 12 and 2 more honorable mentions. So we're pretty excited about this. Let us know what you guys think about this first episode here. Hopefully, you guys dig it all. Listen to it. Give us your opinions on if you think a game is too high or too low. Obviously, it's kind of hard to judge right now because you haven't heard the top 16 games. But Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, comment. Comment below whether they're watching YouTube or on the Facebook page or whatever, and let us know of things that you remember of the game or maybe things that we missed. We do our due diligence on some things, but sometimes we misremember. We don't have everything down to exact science, but we nailed it down pretty well there, and I'm excited to for next Tuesday, and we go out and get down closer to that top 10. And again, we've already had a couple games where vice versa, where you had left off, I didn't, blah blah blah, and this is only a fraction of it. It's going to happen again. So just what a fun series. So yeah, like, share, comment, subscribe, follow the page on Real Talk on Facebook, and but yeah, been a nice way to start this.
Yeah, these next 16 games, there's some big ones. There's some really good games in here. And as we get down to the top 10, I'm very excited. And we got more honorable mentions coming to you every week, too. So we'll throw some curveballs at you. So, all right. It's been real. Go Blue. And we'll see you guys next week.
Go Blue.
We're out. Real Talk.